All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for the eTRUC Project's Drayage 101 Electrification of the Goods Movement in California webinar. This is our third installment of our partner presentation. And so we're very excited for today's program. Next slide, please. As for today's agenda, we'll quickly get started with just a team intro of the eTRUC team. For those that are new in this space, for the first time joining us for an eTRUC meeting webinar, welcome. And for those of you, we will provide a just brief project overview of the eTRUC project, as well as a little bit about the CTAC and WEDAC advisory committees that we are facilitating for this project, and then we'll kick it off with our Drayage 101 presentation and Q&A. I do want to ask, as we get started into the presentation, any questions that come to mind, feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to save our Q&A session till the end after our guest presenters have completed their presentation, and then we'll field questions that we have queued up from the chat. We'll also ask folks to either raise their hand, come off mute, to ask their questions that they may have regarding the presentation. And this meeting is being recorded, and we will provide the recording to this webinar later on to all of our participants and those on our eTRUC listserv. So with that, let's kick it off with team introduction. So I think I saw my colleague Shamika Dixon join the call. Shamika, are you on? Would you like to introduce yourself real quick to everyone?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shamika Dixon, and I'm the Director of Workforce Development with Grid Alternatives.
And then my colleague Stella Ursula, I don't believe she was able to join us today. She is our Director of Community Engagement and Partnerships. And she's a crucial member of the Grid Alternatives team as well. And I'm Giovanni Hernandez, Clean Mobility Program Manager. Let me kick it off over to the CalSTART team.
Hey. Thanks, Giovanni. Hi, everybody. My name is Twanchi. I'm a project manager here at CalSTART in the Clean Fuels and Infrastructure team. I'll pass it on to Gia.
Hi there, I'm Giovanna Escamilla. I'm an associate project manager here at CalSTART. And yeah, thank you for joining us. And if anyone else from CalSTART is here, I'll pass it over to you. Probably not. So, Kristen.
Well, thank you, Giovanna. My name is Kristen Bush. I am with EPRI's Electric Transportation team as an engineer scientist. Glad to have you all on the call today.
All right, so let's go to the next slide. And Twan, that'll be you.
Great. Thanks, Giovanni. So the eTRUC project, the purpose of it is to create a California research hub to facilitate and accelerate the electrification of heavy-duty drayage vehicle market in key areas. We have a couple of goals and objectives with this project. The first is to advance research, development, and demonstration activities that extend the delivery range of large weight class battery electric trucks, beginning with drayage operations, which we'll be learning about today. We also engage broad stakeholders with a community first approach, and we use their input to promote equity and workforce development opportunities in priority communities, which include pollution burden and impacted communities, and also truck fleets, charging equipment and service providers, electric utilities, and planning agencies. Lastly, we plan, design, and deploy innovative, scalable public corridor charging strategy for heavy-duty electric trucks, again, beginning with drayage trucks. Passing it back to you, Giovanni.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Twan. So as part of this project, CalSTART, EPRI, and Grid Alternatives team have worked very closely together to form 2 advisory committees. And the first one being the Community First Technology Advisory Committee, CTAC for short, and then the other one that's the Workforce Development Advisory Committee. And so both advisory committees comprise of different CBOs, environmental justice organizations, respectively workforce agencies, other nonprofits and partners that are interested in either of those focuses, right, of those advisory committees. And we do have some partners that actually are members of both of them. So just to acquaint you a little bit with both of them, the CTAC goals is to use a community engagement framework to ensure that pollution impacted, underserved, and tribal communities are involved in creating and guiding the initiative. We specifically are focused on ensuring that there are equitable outcomes and that we are applying equitable lenses as we move throughout the different phases of the project. And there will be later on, community engagement phase where we are seeking feedback from the community on picking site locations, potential site locations, et cetera, and just fielding for equitable outcomes from the community as well, and what we should make sure that we take into account as we're executing this project. On the workforce development side of things, the goals are to ensure that pollution impacted, underserved, and tribal communities are involved in creating and guiding the initiative, and that these priority communities are involved and benefit from the larger clean energy transition, for heavy duty electrification, jobs that are created, and other resultant economic opportunities. So one of the big tasks here is doing a deep dive into prospective jobs, upskilling opportunities, and provide recommendations for trainings, for new curriculums in this evolving space for this project, respective to heavy duty electrification. So with that, we're gonna I'm very happy to introduce one of our CalSTART colleagues, Dominique Folico, who is the Drayage Truck Incentives Manager over at CalSTART. And we are looking forward to your presentation. So I'm going to kick it off to you, Dominique.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Giovanni. My name is Dominique Folico. I am the Drayage Truck Incentives Manager over at CalSTART. I oversee the drayage set-aside funds in the HVIP portfolio, and I oversee the administration of the Port of LA and Port of Long Beach funding that is also offered within HVIP as well. And I also have oversight over the drayage coordination group at CalSTART, where we are doing interviews with fleets, communities, OEMs. So if there's any interest in participating in our drayage coordination group interviews, please reach out to the eTRUC team and let them know that you're interested. And I would love to speak with you and gather your thoughts. And if we want to continue this conversation later and you have more questions or more things that come up, just reach out to eTRUC and we'll have discussions. But I'll kick off my presentation. So what is drayage? Next slide, please. Drayage is the trucking of shipping containers over short distances, typically between a port, rail yard, or other intermodal facility and a final destination point, which is often a warehouse or a distribution center. It essentially acts as the first mile or last mile of containerized shipping. Next slide, please. So I made an infographic sort of about the drayage cycle. This is port drayage specific. So this displays the journey of cargo via container from point A to point B. So in this case, inbound cargo arrives to the local port via a container ship, which is then pulled off at the terminal and loaded onto the chassis of a Class 8 vehicle. From there, the drayage operator hauls the cargo to an inland facility that's a warehouse or distribution center, typically within a 50-mile radius for delivery. And that container is unloaded at that facility, or it is reloaded with more cargo at that facility once it's unloaded. And then the truck returns back to the port to drop off the container. So we have that kind of full circle view of drayage and how it works in port applications. Next slide, please. What is intermodal and rail drayage? So in this scenario, we're starting from point A, which is a rail yard. So the cargo comes in via train and it is unloaded onto the Class 8 vehicle. And then it is brought to a logistics facility to be unloaded or reloaded with cargo and then brought back to the rail yard. But you have some scenarios in which the cargo is picked up at the port still and then taken to logistics facilities, and rail yard is somehow still in the mix where you can take that cargo back to the rail yard. So the two can be mixed, but just wanted to share sort of an infographic so that there's the full circle drayage use case displayed here for both port drayage and intermodal and rail. Next slide, please. We're going to go into the electrification of the supply chain. What makes drayage an ideal use case for electrification? So I have 4 things listed here: operations, distance, charging, and policy. Drayage routes are often predictable. They're back to base operations, so it makes them perfectly suitable for fleet electrification. The distance. So drayage operations are generally short daily driving distances. So the current vehicle technologies that are available, they're suited for that sort of range that would suit the operations of the daily drayage operators. Charging. So back to base operations in major drayage corridors offer sufficient charging opportunities in areas that typically have plenty of electrical infrastructure and ongoing development. So in and around major ports, there's a lot of electrical infrastructure that is available, and there's ongoing development of that infrastructure. So there's even more that's being built out. So having the charging at point A and point B is something that we are going to have, and something that we already do have. And we're seeing that sort of model work really well in this use case. And then policies. So authorities in major ports have a strong focus on decarbonizing their operations, supported by state and local governments with a focus on improving air quality. So yeah, policy is a huge contributing factor into what makes the use case ideal for drayage. We want to improve the air quality for the communities in and around ports. So policy is having a huge impact on that, and the ports are also playing or taking on their role to support that as well. Next slide, please. So who's funding the electrification of drayage? So beneficial cargo owners are investing in the sustainability of their own operations. So we're seeing a trend where large corporations have sustainability goals that they need to meet, and they're focusing more on their impact. And so there's the investment from the BCOs. There's also private investments in startup companies like charging depots for shared charging as a service. The truck OEMs, I'm missing probably a bunch, but there's a lot of startup companies in this space where private investments are being made to support the electrification of drayage. The ports themselves are also investing in the electrification of drayage. The Clean Truck Fund program is a great example that is at the San Pedro Bay port complex, there's a container fee that is collected upon entry to the ports, which is then funneled into a larger sort of pool of money, and it is distributed to my program, HVIP, or CalSTART, sorry, not my program, but CalSTART, and CARB's program. And those container fees are going to the plussing up of HVIP vouchers. And there's other plans for those Clean Truck Fund program dollars to be utilized in the future as well. Utilities are also investing in the electrification of drayage. A great example of this is the Southern California Edison Charge Ready Transport program, but there's other utilities across the state that are offering other incentive programs that the landowners that are trying to invest in or make the transition to electric incentivized, and even they can act as sort of a project manager in some capacity to help with the labor that goes into an infrastructure build and the planning that goes into that. The state government is funding the electrification of drayage. So the California Air Resources Board funds HVIP, which is the Hybrid and Zero Emission Truck and Bus Voucher Incentive Project. That is the program that I work on over at CalSTART, where we offer vouchers for trucks and buses to be funded off the directly off the purchase price of the vehicles. So it's a dealer-driven program. No scrapping is required. The fleet that is interested goes to the dealer, and the dealer submits the application on behalf of the customer. So it's really one of these programs that seeks to overcome the barriers to entry for fleets, because the application process is pretty seamless, and the upfront investment into the vehicle technology is greatly reduced by the HVIP incentive amount and the structure of that. The California Energy Commission is also heavily investing in the electrification of drayage. Over at CalSTART, we have the Energize program, which stands for Energy Infrastructure Incentives for Zero Emission. The drayage funding lane for the private fleets actually opened and launched yesterday. And if I could ask for someone on the eTRUC team to drop the websites for both HVIP and Energize in the chat for people to utilize if they're interested. Right now, there is funding available in drayage for HVIP in the drayage set aside. There's $19 million currently still available in the Clean Truck Fund dollars that are being administered through HVIP. So there is that extra plus up money being offered on top of the HVIP voucher. And there is those energized dollars that can be used. And so we have a unique opportunity right now for private fleets to take advantage of investing in the vehicle technology and infrastructure paired by utilizing both programs. Also, local air quality management districts have their own grants that they have. It's the Volkswagen Mitigation Program and Carl Moyer programs. I'm familiar with both of those. They offer incentives for Class 8 drayage vehicles. Those programs do require scrapping, but when you scrap a truck, there may be more of an incentive. If you are interested in getting information about those two programs, please reach out to eTRUC and they will get you in contact with me, and I can send over their information. The federal government is also heavily investing in the electrification of drayage. The EPA has their Clean Ports program. That's very popular right now. Lots of people are making lots of really big and exciting plans that are propelling the electrification of drayage and making it, making plans and realizing that this it's starting in California, but it's going out to all the other ports. So California really is paving the way, but with this Clean Ports program, we're going to see other ports adopting the electric vehicle technology and the infrastructure, and hopefully moving towards their sustainability goals. And then the Department of Energy is investing, and also there's Inflation Reduction Act tax credits that are administered to folks who purchase vehicles and acquire charging infrastructure. So you can talk to your tax advisors about that. There's some money there that can also be collected and seen sort of as an investment and an incentive. Next slide, please. So in one of my first slides, I mentioned that policy is a factor that is driving the electrification of drayage, and the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulation is a great example of that. On April 28th, 2023, CARB approved the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation, and this includes drayage truck requirements for trucks transporting cargo to and from California's intermodal seaports and rail yards. The ACF drayage truck requirements will help meet the directive of Executive Order N7920, which set a goal for 100% zero emission drayage trucks in the state by 2035. The purpose of the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation as it relates to drayage truck requirements are to expand public health and environmental benefits by increasing the use of zero emission technology, provide particulate matter and NOx emission reductions to help attain regional and federal air quality standards, provide GHG emission reductions to help meet the state's GHG targets and climate goals, accelerate the market for zero emission trucks, and to support the comprehensive statewide strategy to reduce emissions from freight transportation. So you will see within the communities, there's going to be these benefits from ACF. And I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to Leela Rao from Port of Long Beach. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dominique, for that. Let's see, let me put my camera on here. All right, there we go. So thank you for having me here today to talk with you about drayage truck electrification at the Port of Long Beach. I apologize for my voice. I have been getting over something for the past week and it just will not go away. So please bear with me. So I am a senior environmental specialist here at the Port of Long Beach, and I work on a variety of different programs to support our Clean Air Action Plan. But amongst those is I'm the manager of our Clean Truck program. So go ahead and do the next slide. All right, so the Port of Long Beach and Port of Los Angeles together have over 23,000 trucks registered to do drayage at the ports. Given the large impact these trucks have on our neighboring communities, an important part of our Joint Clean Air Action Plan, which is a strategy document that aims to reduce emissions from all major sources of categories at the ports, is our Clean Truck program. When the CAP was last updated in 2017, the ports included a goal of zero emission drayage by 2035, and that goal was then backed up by the state in its Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation. To support this transition, the Port of Long Beach also has its own goal of installing 100 charging stations by 2028. To date, we're starting to see some real progress in zero emission truck deployments. As of March 2024, there were 287 zero emission trucks at the Port's Drayage Truck Registry, of which all but 8 were battery electric. So we had 279 battery electrics and 8 hydrogen fuel cell trucks. We're seeing about 1.7% of cargo moves conducted by zero emission trucks, which may not seem like very much, but you do need to start somewhere. It's been kind of exciting over the past few years to see it go from, less than 1% to now almost 2%. You can see from this chart on the left here that in the past 3 years, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of zero emission trucks from less than 20 in 2021 to now almost 300. So it's been slow, but it is starting to take off, and we're pretty excited by that. In addition to the progress on the truck deployment front, we're making progress on infrastructure deployments as well. We have our 2 charging stations that you can see in that picture there at our Terminal Access Center, which is a site at the Port of Long Beach that supports our Joint Ports Clean Truck program. These 2 charging stations currently provide free charging for electric trucks in our Drayage truck registry and are seeing increasing usage as more battery electric trucks enter the service. We also have leases with several companies for installation of publicly accessible heavy-duty truck charging, with the phase 1 of the Watt EV site already complete in operation. We have closed 1 RFP for installation of additional charging at our Terminal Access Center. And we actually just held a pre-solicitation workshop for a second RFP that will be released in the coming months for installation and operation of charging equipment at yet another site in the port. So all these projects together will allow us to meet our charging station goal by 2028. We also have our Clean Truck Fund rate, and that charges $10 per TEU, which is the unit of measurement of a shipping container. So most containers you see are 40 feet and are charged $20 to the cargo owner for the pickup or drop off of a container by truck. Zero emission truck trips are exempt from the rate. The proceeds that are collected are currently going to fund the Port Drayage truck voucher supplements to the state's eTRUC program that Dominique just talked about. And that's where truck fleets less than 20 receive an extra $100,000 on top of their HFIP incentive, and fleets over 21 get $75,000. And we're also using our Clean Truck Fund to support infrastructure deployments in and around the port for drayage serving sites. Now, we certainly are seeing some challenges, right? So given that we're in the early stages of this transition, the challenges really abound. One of the largest early hurdles was the weak demand for zero emission drayage truck vouchers. And so we attributed this weak demand to a number of factors, including slow truck production schedules, increasing vehicle costs, significant ancillary costs to purchase zero emission trucks, such as taxes and insurance, and the slow pace and availability of publicly accessible charging and fueling infrastructure. So many fleets that do drayage at our sites, they lease their land. So they have a lot of difficulty installing infrastructure at their site. We also have a lot of small fleets who just use short-term parking arrangements today. And so there is and will continue to be a significant reliance on public charging and fueling for drayage. While the port is doing what it can to support infrastructure deployments for drayage, the reality, I'm sorry. All right, so while the port's doing what it can to support drayage infrastructure deployments, the reality is that the port land is extremely valuable and it's really prioritized for other uses, which means that most of the infrastructure installations will need to occur off port property and along those good movement corridors like the I-710. Finally, a significant challenge to date has been the fact that drayage is a low margin business that relies on cheap trucks secured off the secondary market. However, it's going to be really a long time until a secondary market develops, particularly as large fleets that turn over their trucks at a very high rate are increasingly restricted in their access to zero emission truck funding. Even with the large incentives being offered to small fleets, it's all those extra costs that I mentioned of the taxes and the insurance and the access to public charging and parking and charging costs. Those are all really still very high, making it challenging for the small fleets to move forward as early adopters. As a result, the port's going to continue to explore alternative options for zero emission truck incentives, which will hopefully start to address some of these challenges. That's all I have for now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dominique and Leela, for this presentation and the valuable information that each of you have provided. At this time, I would love to open it up to any questions that any of our attendees may have. Gonna see if anything has come in through the chat, but feel free to put it in the chat, raise your hand, take yourself off mute, and be able to ask your questions to our presenters here. So yeah, anything that anyone may have for our presenters? While we wait here to see what may be brewing in the minds of our attendees, I do have a couple of questions here for Leela, if you don't mind. So just to get us started here, with the electrification of drayage operations, charging infrastructure installation availability seems to be a rising challenge. And you touched on some of that already in your presentation. What are some of the strategies deployed by the Port of Long Beach to alleviate this need?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think one of the things that we're doing at the port is we're participating a lot in regional planning efforts. There's a number of different efforts that are underway. And, you know, it's really important for us to be a part of that because, as I mentioned, this charging isn't going to take place at the port. It really is a regional issue and solution. And so, you know, being a part of that it is really important. We're also looking, you know, we looked at the possibility of setting aside port land. We did a public truck charging and fueling assessment for the Port of Long Beach, and that was pretty helpful in helping to first develop a set of criteria for how we would look at our property and see, you know, what might be good sites for putting public charging and fueling at the port. And then several of those sites that were identified have already been leased out to folks to put in charging stations. And then we have RFPs out we'll have one out for one and we'll have another going out for another of the sites. So we are looking at, you know, having some charging at the port, helping with the planning for charging outside. And then we're also, you know, in their second year of our Clean Truck Fund spending plan, we prioritize investment into charging infrastructure. And so we are working with the Mobile Source Review Committee, MSRC, to go and actually fund additional charging sites. And then we are also working with partners on securing additional funding for regional infrastructure. So we partnered with the CEC on their Department of Transportation CFI application, and we've supported AQMD in their APA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant application to install drayage infrastructure, and others, right? And for all of those, you know, we've committed to put in some of our Clean Truck Fund rate dollars to help, you know, make those federal dollars go further. And really strengthen our, you know, support of this whole regional approach to infrastructure for drayage.
Thank you for that, Leela. We do have some questions coming in. So I don't see any hands raised right now, so I'll go ahead and read off some questions I see coming into the chat here. Ari asked, have you found that these third-party drayage companies who own the trucks are willing to share their sustainability data, or any suggestions for how to go about getting this data when they don't see an incentive to share? So Dominique or Leela, any insight on that?
I guess maybe just a clarifying question. Are they talking about like the truck as a service models? Or I'm not really quite sure.
Yeah, and Ari, feel free to go off mute and clarify if elaborate. I think it's Ari Klaparda. You can take yourself off mute if you like.
Really in a place to speak, but I was speaking more so to the truck emission data in these companies, you know, when trying to do research into their sustainability model to maybe get more funding in other programs to, you know, want them to switch over to electric or clean, you know, vehicles. Have you found that they're willing to share, you know, their emission data? So to kind of have a gauge of what it is.
Yeah, so I guess I mean, outside of like doing demonstration projects, we don't really get a lot of data per se from the trucks. You know, we do an emissions inventory every year, and we have some limited data, and there's some assumptions that go into calculating, you know, the drayage truck emissions based on for that for those calculations. But yeah, it's more. I don't think we don't get sort of like regular reports from these fleets, if that's what you're asking.
Thank you. I was just curious.
Mm-hmm.
We do have another question that we got from Dr. Rawls. What strategies are being used to upskill current employees to meet new jobs at the port?
So we do have quite a significant workforce development program. The port works very closely with our local colleges, Long Beach Community College, and as well as actually LBUSD and CSU Long Beach. We have quite a few programs that are working on developing the pipeline for new talent. And then we're also working on a joint project with the Port of Los Angeles for a workforce development campus that will be going in at the ports, more geared towards, I think, what you're talking about, which is the upskilling and working on developing that workforce of the future. So there is quite a lot of work going on in that area.
Any insights on that joint campus, like when it may be up and running?
You know, that is not my project, so I can't give you a lot of details on that, other than I know there's been a lot of investment, lots in the works, but it is going to be quite an undertaking.
That's exciting. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing. We do have another question here from Jay Frank Huercio. We've learned that the current total of drayage, EVs, hydrogen at Long Beach being 287 or 1.7% of the total. Do we anticipate the charging to come in fast enough to support the goal of getting all of the drayage trucks as ZEVs in the time frame?
I mean, it's certainly going to be a challenge. You know, I mean, like I said, we've got 23,000 trucks in our drayage truck registry, and the pace at which electric charging is going to need to come online is dramatic, right? And we are certainly not seeing the development of that infrastructure come online as fast as we need to support the early transition. I think I feel more positive about maybe the 2035 goal. I'm much more nervous about the near term, right? You know, advanced clean fleets is currently on hold, but you know, once that does come, assuming it comes into effect, you know, I think the effect might be fairly dramatic, right? You know, it's going to be hard on the drayage community. Like I said, these are a lot of small fleets, you know, who just are going to be really, or who rely on public charging and fueling, and they're going to be real challenged. That said, there are a lot of projects that are in the works that are kicking off very soon. And so I'm hopeful that there will be more and more coming online in the next 2 years or so. But yeah, I think the first years are going to be rough, and it's gonna be a rough road for probably the foreseeable future.
Thank you for that. And I think Jay Frank had a follow-up question here about, I think it's in relation to the joint workforce campus you mentioned. Is there a contact that we can reach out to? Whose project is it at the ports? He's asking, can we get a contact?
Yeah, so that's part of our sort of government relations and community work group, and I can work on getting in contact, and maybe I can send it over to you, Giovanni, if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Send that over and I can share that.
Yeah.
I think Tigran was trying to get off mute. Were you trying to get off mute to ask a question, Tigran? Tigran, just clarifying if you were trying to get off mute to ask a question. If not, I can we'll move on to the next question that we have. I see that we have Mike Miles asking, are there Cal eTRUC port programs? I'm assuming, are there CalStart eTRUC port programs available for private companies developing improved fleet port EV technology such as energy efficiency? I don't know if anyone from the CalStart team has any insights on this, or if Leela, if this applies to you.
Just for clarification, my point here is that there was a reference in an earlier slide about technology development from private companies and private investments. But when it pertains to efficiency of operations among port vehicles, et cetera, does CalStart, et cetera, in a larger sense, have any avenues to assist or assist promoting those private investors to have access to technology that could be developed that would ultimately benefit all the operators?
Mike, on the CalStart side, if you'd like to reach out to me via email, we can have a separate offline call, and I can put you in contact with certain members of our team that can better assist you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Miles, if you can go ahead and if you want to like shoot a direct message to Dominique on here with your email, and then Dominique can follow up with you. That would be the easiest way. All right. And so, Dominique, now since we have you back here, I actually have a follow-up question for you, if you don't mind. You mentioned, some monies that are left over in some of these incentive programs that you talked about, right? I don't know if you can share, is there a deadline coming up for any of these incentive programs? What challenges have arisen with any of these incentive programs? Can you share a little bit more about, just the money that's left over and any upcoming deadlines for folks to be aware of, and how it's been going and what are some challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So in HVIP, we have the Drayage side dollars, and then we also have the Port of LA and Port of Long Beach Clean Truck Fund dollars that are in HVIP acting as the plus up. We launched the Port Plus Up on November 14th of 2023 with $60 million available. We currently have $19 million available as of today. So we're left with 1/3 of that funding. So there's been a huge success with our partnership with the ports to encourage folks to adopt zero emission vehicle technology. Their plus up is incentivizing folks, and we're seeing that in real time, really short time period that this money is being allocated. And then in HVIP, CARB awarded another $80 million in their funding plan for this fiscal year to Drayage, which is supporting the vouchers that are being plussed up with the port dollars. So the way that the HVIP voucher money is allocated is some is coming from the HVIP funds and some is coming from the ports. And so if you go to the HVIP website, the available funding is updated on a daily basis to reflect the funding amounts that are left over. So there's no deadlines. It's all first come, first serve. So once the funds run out, that's when we would close. And in terms of challenges, I think that I am kind of echoing Leela with the charging aspect being a challenge. And we're dealing, when you are talking to a small fleet about adopting the technology, they're used to buying trucks that are often used and they're cheaper and they're unfamiliar with this technology, and it's quite an investment for them to make. So I think that challenges is showing in real life application, like how can this technology benefit them from a business perspective and total cost of ownership analysis. And so we actually have our Cal Fleet Advisor team who can walk fleets through TCO benefits, what a fleet needs, what vehicle would be best suited for the routes. Really, they act as a virtual project manager. And that's a really useful tool that I direct a lot of fleets to help support them. And then we also have our ride-in drives that offer a unique opportunity for folks to get behind the wheel of one of these trucks and give it a test drive or be driven by a driver. And that's a great way for people to get more comfortable with the technology and to see it, how it works. And so challenges is the education piece of how you can utilize the incentive to comply with regulation in a cost-effective way. And also through successful vehicle deployments and projects that we've seen in real life port drayage applications, that's larger fleets and also smaller fleets have successful projects as well. They have business models that other fleets can look at and model, and it demystifies the conception that may exist that the technology isn't suitable for drayage applications when you can see it working in real time and how it's benefiting other businesses. So in terms of challenges, I think that's what I'm focused on mostly, is just getting people in touch with Cal Fleet Advisor, getting the incentive information out there, supporting small fleets, and focusing on equity and accessibility to the technology.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all that information, Dominique. And I just went ahead and shared your contact information in the chat with everyone. So anyone that may have questions for you, that they can follow up directly with you. Thank you, Dominique. I'm going to go ahead and ask one more question, given the last couple minutes we have left together here. Leela, just related to this project that will be focused on megawatt charging, how do you envision high power megawatt level charging to impact drayage operations at the ports?
It's an interesting question. It has a lot of potential, right? So I think one of the things that could really potentially help with is actually helping to solve the weight penalty issue that we see with battery electric trucks today. Right now, in order to be able to get sufficient range, which you can't even really get to, you can't get enough batteries on there to do 2 turns to the Inland Empire, for example, which you could totally do with the diesel truck today. But if you had fast, high power charging, right, that could allow for more frequent charging of smaller batteries on board, Now, then you could go to hauling, sort of full loads, which you can't necessarily do today, and potentially do multiple turns, which you can't really do today either. So it could be a game changer. In addition, drayage operations are often varied. It's actually not unusual for a truck to, it is unusual for a truck to only do short haul operations, for example. So we have, drayage often, they'll do something short and then something longer, something really long. So it can be a real mix of uses. And so that's not really great for today's battery electric technology. So if you had megawatt charging, it could allow for a battery electric truck and a fleet to be used for the full suite of operations that you see today, all the duty cycles, and not just relegate drayage to short haul operations, and which is going to allow for more full utilization of the trucks, which is going to lead to a better TCO, right? So, today in a diesel truck, you might have slip seating operations where, a truck does one shift and then somebody else gets into that truck and does a second shift, right? You can't do that with a battery electric truck today that needs to sit and charge for 4 hours in between shifts, right? So in order to have that same kind of operation, now you need 2 battery electric trucks for every diesel truck. And so you want to have a better TCO, you need to be able to operate that truck efficiently and for multiple shifts in a day. And so having that megawatt charging is going to enable for that, and which is going to enable that truck to be used more, get higher productivity. You won't have to have that 2-to-1 ratio like you do right now in some operations. And it could really make a big difference in being able to make that truck affordable.
Mhm.
So I think there's a lot of different ways in which you'll see megawatt charging have an impact, but I think those are just a few that come to mind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Leela. And gonna put it out there one more time for any last question that we may have from our audience before we just wrap things up here prior to closing our webinar. Any last question that anyone may want to ask for Leela or Dominique?
This is Heidi with BP Pulse. I have a quick question for the Port of Long Beach, Leela.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. Full disclosure, we responded to your RFPs and RFIs, but just wanted to sort of get a sense if you're able to respond. If not, please don't. But what are you hearing just like with regard to terminal operators and their interest in sort of facilitating the integration of EV charging into their footprints at the ports? I heard you say earlier that, currently charging on site is not feasible, but does that include the spaces owned and operated by terminal operators?
I would say it's especially true for the terminal operators, right? So, the port land is some of the most expensive land on the planet, right? And so it really and it has to be used for really specific purposes. There's a Tidelands Trust that really requires it to be used for specific ways, particularly for waterfront property. So, when we if you took a look at our charging and fueling study, you'll see that we had a bunch of criteria that we laid out for how we would determine if a site at the port could be feasible for charging or not. Anything that's related to terminal operations is not suitable for charging for on-road trucks. It's pretty much the bottom line.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you so much, Leela.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So with that, let's move on to our closing items here. Gia, next slide, please. Thank you so much. So just wanted to share there our contact information for the grid team, also EPRI. Anyone that is interested in joining our quarterly CTAC and WEDAC meetings and becoming an active participant and member in any of those advisory committees, please feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, and I'm happy to send over all the details and calendar invites if you would like to start joining those meetings. Additionally, I put in the chat the eTRUC website as well. For more information, anyone that hasn't gotten a chance to visit the site, we actually post all of the recordings and a copy of the PowerPoint presentations for each of the advisory committee meetings on the website, and also the recordings of these webinar series that we have been executing. So in a couple of days, you'll see the recording of this particular Drayage 101 webinar on the website as well. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate your time, the wonderful questions that came in, and looking forward to continuing to stay engaged with you all and partnering and collaborating with you in the future. Thank you once again, Leela and Dominique, for your time and for sharing your expertise with our audience today. And may all of you have a great rest of your week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.